Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into a really trippy concept today. It's the idea that time, as we know it, is basically an illusion. And get this, the possibility that we're all living multiple lives all at once.
Yeah, kind of wild, right?
It is, isn't it?
We're looking at a whole mix of sources today, everything from ancient spiritual traditions like Advaita Vedanta and Buddhism to modern science stuff like relativity and quantum mechanics.
And even, a fun little test from a source we found called the Spiritual Seek gets you thinking about these things in a different way.
Exactly. So our mission today is to break down these ideas, show you how they're actually grounded in both ancient wisdom and modern science.
And maybe, leave you with some mind-bending thoughts to chew on.
Okay, so let's start with the concept of time as a construct of the mind.
Right.
Can you break that down a bit? Like, how do different spiritual traditions view this whole time thing?
Well, many traditions suggest that time as we experience it isn't a thing in itself. It's not like an independent entity. It's more like something created by our minds. Okay, so our minds are making time up.
Pretty much. A good example is Advaita Vedanta.
Right.
They talk about Brahman, the ultimate reality,
Mm-hmm.
and they say it's beyond both time and space. Time only pops up, they believe, when our consciousness gets all wrapped up in the individual ego, that sense of me with its memories and desires and all that.
So it's our individual minds, our sense of me, that are creating this experience of time flowing from past to future.
Yeah, exactly. And you see this idea reflected in Buddhism, too, where clinging to the past, like regrets or worrying about the future, that's considered the root of suffering.
Makes sense.
They emphasize being present, being here and now.
In the moment, yeah.
Right, where that illusion of linear time kind of dissolves.
It's funny, that makes me think of that Rumi quote. Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there.
I love that quote.
It's like our usual way of thinking about time with all its judgments and labels, good, bad, past, future, it's kind of blocking us from a bigger truth.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Rumi's pointing towards something beyond our limited view of time. And this is a good segue, I think, to the idea of simultaneous incarnations.
Oh, okay, here's where things get really interesting.
Right.
Are we talking about living multiple lives, like all happening at the same time?
That's exactly what some traditions suggest.
Wow.
Let's look at Kabbalah. In very simple terms, it talks about these divine emanations.
Okay.
Think of them as different aspects of the divine, and they exist outside of linear time.
Gotcha.
And our souls, they're connected to these emanations.
Right.
So we can, in theory, experience multiple realities at the same time.
So our souls, they aren't stuck in this linear time thing.
Right.
They exist in a realm where past, present, future, it's all happening at once.
Precisely. And Theosophy takes this even further. It proposes that what we call past or future lives, those are just different sides of our soul, all happening at the same time, but in different dimensions. Imagine a gem with many facets.
Oh, I like that.
Each facet is like a different lifetime.
I get it.
But we only see one at a time,
That makes sense. But it raises the question, if we are, these multidimensional beings living multiple lives at once, why are we only aware of this one, this specific life and time?
That's where selective awareness comes in. Think of your consciousness as a filter.
Okay.
It takes all the infinite possibilities out there and narrows them down to a manageable experience, like a radio.
Oh, okay.
You can only tune into one station at a time,
Yeah.
even though there are tons of others out there.
So our brains are creating a story, a linear narrative,
Yeah.
just focusing on one lifetime at a time, so we don't freak out, basically.
Exactly. We need that cause and effect thinking, that linear time perception to navigate the physical world. It's practical, but it also makes us kind of blind to the bigger picture. Like we're missing this whole multidimensional reality because of it.
Like we're looking through a tiny window.
Right.
So is there a way to widen that view, to experience that timeless reality that these traditions talk about?
That is the question, isn't it? And it brings us to the realm of altered states of consciousness.
Ooh, okay.
Things like deep meditation, near-death experiences, even psychedelic experiences. Those can temporarily remove those filters, like glimpses of timelessness.
Wait, so people have actually reported experiencing events from multiple lifetimes at the same time?
There have been some pretty wild reports, yeah. Like in near-death experiences, people describe their whole life flashing before their eyes. But it's not linear, It's all at once, all these moments together, like they're outside of time.
Wow. Must be a pretty intense experience.
I can only imagine.
But it does support this idea that our other lifetimes aren't past, they're happening now. along with this one.
Exactly. And then there are people who, through past life regression or deep meditation, they tap into memories that seem to be from other lifetimes. It's pretty fascinating.
So we've got these spiritual traditions talking about the illusion of time and all these simultaneous lives we might be living, but what about science? Does modern science back any of this up?
That's where things get really interesting. Some of the biggest scientific discoveries actually echo these ancient ideas.
Okay, like what?
Well, Einstein's theory of relativity, for starters. That completely changed how we understand time.
Yeah, I remember learning about relativity in school, but to be honest, I never really got it. It always seemed too, abstract. Can you explain it in a way that connects to what we've been talking about?
Yeah, of course. So relativity basically says time is part of this four-dimensional thing called space-time.
Space-time.
Yeah. And the key idea is that time, it's relative.
Relative.
Yeah. Like what you experience as now, that might be the past or the future for someone else, depending on where they are and how fast they're moving.
So there's no set timeline that everyone's on. It's more fluid than that.
Exactly. Time can speed up or slow down depending on your perspective. And this blows the whole idea of time as a straight line right out of the water.
It's like our perception of time is more like a flip book.
Oh, yeah.
All those pictures are there already. And we're just flipping through them, which creates the illusion of motion.
I like that analogy. It's a good way to think about it. And then you have quantum mechanics.
Quantum mechanics, here we go.
That challenges our ideas about time and reality even more.
Okay, I'm ready. Take me into the quantum realm.
So quantum mechanics, it looks at the super tiny world, atoms and the particles that make them up.
Uh-huh.
And it finds some pretty mind-blowing stuff. One big thing is non-locality. Basically, it means particles can affect each other instantly, like across huge distances, no time delay or anything.
Whoa. So space and time, those limits we think about, they don't really apply at that quantum level.
Well, that's what the research suggests. There's this deeper reality where everything's connected in ways we can't even picture with our normal logic. It's pretty wild.
It is wild. And you mentioned something before, wave function collapse. What was that again?
Oh, right. Imagine a wave, right? And that wave represents all the possible states a particle could be in. But when we observe it, when we look at it, the wave collapses. It picks one specific state.
So our act of looking at it, that makes it real.
Kinda. It's like our observation helps to make reality happen.
That's crazy. So we're not just watching reality, we're part of creating it.
That's a big question physicists and philosophers are still arguing about. And then some physicists have this model. It's called the block universe. In this model, the past, present, and future, they're all there at once. They all exist within this big block of space-time.
Okay, whoa. So everything that's ever been and ever will happen, it's all real, just at different points in this block. Yeah. And we're just moving through it, experiencing it bit by bit.
Yeah, like a cursor on a screen.
This is really blowing my mind. So are you saying all these possibilities are out there until we come along and look at them and then they become set in stone?
That's the basic idea.
Yeah.
It challenges that whole fixed timeline thing and says maybe past, present, future, maybe they're all happening at the same time. Way more interconnected than we usually think.
So much to think about. Okay, so we've got these ancient traditions, right? And now modern science is coming along and saying, hey, maybe they were onto something.
Right.
But you mentioned before, there are some really specific examples where these two worlds, spirituality and science, they actually meet up. Can you give us some aha moments where they line up perfectly?
Yeah, for sure. Let's start with the Vedic concept of Maya.
Yeah.
Maya, in Hinduism, it means that the material world is kind of an illusion, like a veil that's hiding true reality.
So it's we think things are solid and real, but they're not.
That's the idea. It's all a bit of a trick played by our senses and minds. Now, switch over to quantum mechanics. It shows that particles, they don't actually exist as solid things.
Yeah.
They're more like probabilities.
Yeah.
Or wave functions, remember. They only become real when they're observed. So both Maya and quantum mechanics are kind of saying the same thing. Reality is way more fluid and weird than we think.
And it's all connected, right? That was the other big idea.
Totally. And they both say consciousness might be involved in making reality what it is.
That's a huge connection. What else? Give me another example.
Okay, let's go with Buddhist impermanence and relativity. Buddhism, it's all about anicca, which means impermanence. Everything's changing all the time. Nothing stays the same.
Yeah, change is the only constant.
Right. Now think about relativity. It says time. It's not this fixed thing. It's relative. It changes depending on things like how fast you're moving.
So they're both saying the same thing. Reality is dynamic, always changing, always in motion.
Exactly. They're like, let go of your rigid ideas about time. Embrace the flow, man.
Love it. These connections are so cool. Okay, any other mind-blowing examples of where spirituality and science shake hands?
How about non-locality? From quantum physics and the mystical idea of interconnectedness. Remember quantum entanglement?
Yeah, where those two particles are linked no matter how far apart they are.
Right, like they're communicating instantly. It hints at a deeper connection beyond space and time. And this idea, it pops up in mystical experiences all over the world. Sufism, shamanism, Advaita Vedanta, they all talk about this feeling of oneness, of unity.
Like there's no separation, really. Everything's one big web.
That's the gist. So quantum entanglement, those mystical experiences, they both point to a reality where we're all fundamentally connected.
Earlier, we talked about altered states of consciousness. Like, they might give us a peek into this timeless reality, but is there, like, scientific proof that these states are real?
Yeah.
That what these spiritual people are experiencing is legit?
There is. Neuroscience is starting to back it up. They're studying meditation, especially with people who've been meditating for a long time. And they see some interesting changes in brain activity.
Like what?
Well, during deep meditation, there's less activity in the default mode network of the brain.
That's the part that's always thinking about ourselves, right?
Yeah, like that voice in your head that's always going on about the past or worrying about the future.
Right, right. So meditation quiets that down.
Exactly. And a lot of meditators say they experience this eternal now.
Eternal now?
Yeah, like past and future disappear, and there's just this pure presence. And that lines up with what all those spiritual traditions have been saying for centuries.
Wow. It's amazing how science is catching up.
It really is. It's showing us that these ancient practices, they weren't just made up. They were based on real experiences of consciousness.
Okay, so we've seen how ancient wisdom and science, they're saying similar things about time, consciousness, and reality. But what does it all mean for us? Like, how can we use these ideas in our own lives?
That's the big question, isn't it?
It is. It's one thing to talk about it all, but how do we actually apply it?
Well, if we start seeing time as less of a straight line, more like a fluid thing, it can change how we live.
Okay.
We might be more open to change. We might let go of regrets and worries.
Like loosen our grip on the timeline a little bit?
Exactly. And if we really understand that everything's connected across time, that adds a whole new layer of responsibility to our actions.
Because what we do now affects not just this life, but all those other versions of ourselves.
Right. So even if we accept all this stuff about multiple lives, it doesn't mean our choices don't matter.
It's like we're all dancing together, right?
Yeah.
And our choices are the steps that make the dance what it is.
I love that.
Yeah.
So as we try to wrap our heads around all this, about time being an illusion and maybe having all these other lives going on, there are still things we can do to live better, to make this life count.
Okay, so what are some practical things we can do to, like, integrate these ideas into our everyday lives?
Well, start small. Try to be more mindful.
Mindful.
Yeah, pay attention to what's happening right now, instead of dwelling on the past or stressing about the future.
So simple stuff, like paying attention to my breath or really tasting my food.
Exactly. Those little things can make a big difference. They help you shift out of your head and into the present moment.
Okay, that makes sense. What else? What other practices can help us connect with this timeless awareness?
Well, meditation is a big one, obviously. It calms the mind and opens you up to deeper states of consciousness. Even just a few minutes a day can help.
Right, and we talk about how that actually changes your brain.
Yep. What else? Oh, spending time in nature. That can be really grounding. It helps you tune into the rhythms of life, those cycles that are bigger than our little human timeline.
That's so true. There's a definite sense of timelessness in nature.
Right. It's like stepping out of that busy, tech-filled world and connecting with something ancient and vast.
Are there specific things we can do in nature to, like, really tune into that?
Just being present is a good start. Notice the trees, the sounds, the wind.
Simple things.
Exactly. You can also try walking meditations or being mindful while you're gardening. Engage all your senses, you know?
Okay, cool. So we've got mindfulness, we've got nature. What about our relationships with other people?
Ah, that's a big one. If you truly get this idea that we're all connected, it changes how you treat others.
How so?
Well, you start to see each person as this multidimensional being with their own journey.
Like, we're all more than meets the eye.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that leads to more empathy, more compassion.
Instead of judging people, we try to understand them.
Yeah. You see them as part of that interconnected web we were talking about.
Okay, that's beautiful. So what about our relationship with ourselves? Does this apply there too?
Absolutely. If we're open to the idea of multiple lifetimes, well, that can make us a lot more forgiving of ourselves.
Oh, that's interesting. How?
Well, maybe those flaws we see, those mistakes we've made, maybe they're actually opportunities for growth, for learning across all those lifetimes.
So we stop beating ourselves up for the past.
Yeah. We start seeing those past actions as lessons that made us who we are today.
It's like we're all works in progress.
Right. Constantly growing, learning, becoming.
I love that. Okay, so we've got mindfulness, connecting with nature, being kind to others, and forgiving ourselves. What else can help us explore this whole timeless reality?
Well, there's past life regression therapy.
Oh, yeah.
It's a way to access memories from other lifetimes, see if maybe there are unresolved issues from back then that are affecting us now.
Right, like emotional baggage we've been carrying for centuries.
Maybe.
Hmm.
And even if you don't totally believe in past lives, exploring those memories can still help. It can unlock things in your subconscious that you weren't aware of before.
Like therapy for the soul.
Kind of.
Mm.
And then there's creative expression.
Mm.
Art, music, writing, dancing. When we get creative, we tap into this flow state where time seems to disappear.
It's like a different part of us wakes up.
Yeah. And the things that come out of that creative space, they can tell us a lot about ourselves, about our multidimensional nature.
Okay, wow, this is a lot to take in. It feels like we're at the beginning of something big here, like a whole new way of understanding ourselves in the universe.
I think so too. It's pretty exciting.
Are there like specific areas of study that are looking into all this connection between consciousness and reality?
Yeah. There's a whole field called consciousness research that's blowing up right now. It's bringing scientists, philosophers, even spiritual teachers together to figure out what consciousness really is.
So they're finally admitting that consciousness might be more than just a brain thing?
That's the shift. They're looking at near-death experiences, altered states, even the idea that consciousness can exist outside the body.
Wow, okay. This connects back to what we were talking about before, right? About our consciousness maybe existing across multiple lifetimes.
Right.
Are there any specific findings from that research that really stand out to you?
One area that's super interesting is psychedelics.
Psychedelics, okay.
They're doing these controlled studies now,
Mm-hmm.
and they're finding that psychedelics can create mystical experiences, that feeling of interconnectedness that we talked about.
So, like, they give you a taste of what those spiritual folks have been experiencing for ages.
Exactly. And the fact that they can do this in a lab, with all the scientific controls, that's making people take these experiences seriously.
Science is finally catching up. It's validating all this stuff that used to be seen as woo-woo,
Exactly. It's a big deal. But even with all this evidence, it's still hard for a lot of people to accept, right?
Yeah.
That time might be an illusion and that we might have all these other lives going on. It goes against everything we've been taught.
Totally. It's a big shift.
It is. But think about it. Our understanding of the universe has changed so much over time. We used to think the Earth was the center of everything.
Right.
Then we realized, no, it's the sun. And then we discovered this vast, expanding cosmos.
So we're always learning, always expanding our view.
Exactly. And maybe we're on the verge of another big shift now when it comes to time and consciousness.
From a clockwork universe to a quantum one,
I like that.
where anything is possible. But are there, like, any downsides to this shift? Any things we should be careful about?
That's a good point. With any big change, there are challenges.
Like, if we start thinking time isn't so linear, it can raise questions about personal responsibility. If all lifetimes are happening at once, do our choices even matter?
I see what you mean. It's tempting to think, oh, I've got forever to get things right.
Yeah, but the idea of interconnectedness, that tells us our actions have consequences, not just for us now, but for all those other versions of ourselves.
It's that karmic web again, right?
Exactly. So even if we accept this idea of simultaneous incarnations, it doesn't mean we can just do whatever we want.
We still have to be responsible.
Right.
Okay, that makes sense. So as we try to make sense of all this idea of time as an illusion, of all these lives we might be living, what are some key things we can do to, live more consciously, to create a life that really matters?
That's the key question, isn't it?
It is.
And remember, we're just starting to scratch the surface here. The more we explore these ideas, the more questions come up. It's an ongoing journey.
Totally. Well, this has been an incredible deep dive.
It has.
We've explored so much.
We have ancient traditions, modern science, the idea that time might be an illusion, that we might be living multiple lives, and even that consciousness might be this fundamental force in the universe.
And the best part is, there's no one right answer. It's about exploring, questioning, and expanding our awareness.
I love that. So much to think about. For everyone listening, here's a final thought for you to chew on. If all your lifetimes are happening at the same time, what would you do differently right now, knowing that your choices could affect all those other versions of yourself? Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep.
It's a whole new way of looking at things. It's pretty exciting.
It is exciting. Are there specific areas of study that are looking into all this connection between consciousness and reality?
Yeah, there's this whole field called consciousness research that's really taking off. It's bringing scientists, philosophers, even spiritual teachers together to try to figure out what consciousness really is.
So they're finally admitting that consciousness might be more than just a brain thing.
That's the shift, yeah. They're looking at near-death experiences, altered states of consciousness, even the idea that consciousness can exist outside the body.
Wow. Okay. This connects back to what we were talking about before, right? About our consciousness maybe existing across multiple lifetimes.
Exactly.
Are there any specific findings from that research that really jump out at you?
One area that I find super interesting is psychedelics.
Psychedelics, okay.
Yeah, they're doing all these controlled studies now, and they're finding that psychedelics can create mystical experiences, like that feeling of interconnectedness that we talked about.
So it's they give you a little taste of what those spiritual folks have been experiencing for centuries through meditation and stuff.
That's one way to look at it. And the fact that they can do this in a lab, with all the scientific controls, that's making people take these experiences seriously.
It's like science is finally catching up with what the mystics have known all along.
Right. It's pretty cool. But even with all this evidence, it's still a big leap for a lot of people to accept, This idea that time might be an illusion and that we might have all these other lives going on. It goes against everything we've been taught.
It's a huge shift in how we see the world.
It is.
Yeah.
But think about it. Our understanding of the universe has changed so much over time. I mean, we used to think the Earth was the center of everything.
Right.
And then we realized, no, it's the sun. And then we discovered this vast, expanding cosmos.
So we're always learning, always expanding our view.
Exactly. And maybe we're on the verge of another big shift now when it comes to time and consciousness.
From a clockwork universe to a quantum one, right? Where anything is possible.
I like that.
But are there any downsides to this shift? Any things we should be wary of?
That's a good question. With any big change, there are challenges. If we start thinking time isn't so linear, it can raise questions about personal responsibility.
Yeah, I can see that.
If all lifetimes are happening at once, do our choices even matter?
Right. It's tempting to think, oh, I've got forever to get things right.
Yeah, but the idea of interconnectedness, that tells us our actions have consequences. Not just for us now, but for all those other versions of ourselves across those different lifetimes.
It's that karmic web again, right? What we do ripples out and affects everything.
Exactly. So even if we accept this idea of simultaneous incarnations, it doesn't mean we can just do whatever we want. Our choices still matter.
Okay, that makes sense. So as we wrap our heads around all this idea of time as an illusion of all these lives we might be living, what are some key takeaways? How can we live more consciously, create a life that really matters?
Well, I think the most important thing is to remember that we're all connected. To each other, to the universe, to all those other versions of ourselves across time.
Yeah.
And that our choices have power. They can shape our reality in ways we might not even realize.
That's a powerful message. So as we dive deeper into these mysteries, what are some things we can do to, stay grounded, to make sure we're using this knowledge in a positive way?
I think it's important to stay humble, to remember that we don't have all the answers, and to be open to new ideas and perspectives. And most importantly, to approach all of this with a sense of curiosity and wonder, because that's what keeps us learning and growing.
I love that. Curiosity and wonder. It's like we're all explorers, right? On this incredible journey of discovery. Well, this has been an absolutely mind-blowing deep dive. We've explored so much. Ancient traditions, modern science, the possibility that time might be an illusion, that we might have multiple lives, and even that consciousness might be a fundamental force in the universe.
It's been quite a journey.
It really has. So for everyone listening, we want to leave you with this final thought. If all your lifetimes are happening at the same time, what would you do differently right now, knowing that your choices could affect all those other versions of yourself? Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.